Today's an exciting episode because we get to dive into debunking inflammation. Welcome back to Wellness Fixes the Pod. I'm your host, Dr. Kelsey Vick, a board-certified orthopedic doctor of physical therapy, a pelvic floor physical therapist, and the owner and founder of the LL Wellness Sisterhood. And if you missed part 1 of this series, we debunked cortisol, and now we are going to debunk inflammation. And both cortisol and inflammation, the reason I wanted to do this series was because they're both presented to us in such negative lights when in reality we need both for our bodies, and we need to be able to control and regulate both rather than thinking that both of them are the bad guys anytime that those words pop up when we're learning about our overall health and wellness. So in the first part we debunked cortisol, and now we're moving on to inflammation. And I called cortisol the misunderstood mean girl, and I think that inflammation is also a part of that clique because she is also a misunderstood mean girl and necessary for the healing process within our own bodies. So we'll dive into that today. This is part 1 of debunking inflammation, and we'll dive into the overarching physiology of inflammation. And in the upcoming episodes and series, we'll dive in further into inflammation within various tissue types. So muscle tissue, smooth muscle tissue, skeletal muscle tissue, our skin. So we'll go a little bit more specific within those episodes for the different systems in our bodies. But right now, I wanted to give sort of a broad overarching view of inflammation. So we'll dive into that. But before we do, a few updates. Again, if y'all have listened to the podcast, I am so sorry you're sick of me saying this, but we are creating a menstrual cycle program and we want it to be the absolute best. So we need your help. I'll leave the form below for you guys if you're interested in helping us build it. We just want to know what you would like to see from the program. How long, how many workouts a week, what you've liked from programs in the past, what you didn't like, how we can make it the best for you. And there's an option to enter your email at the bottom to be a free tester for the program. Other than that, it's completely anonymous. So I'll leave that sign up below because we would love your help, because again, I want to make this the best and most useful and most valuable program for you guys and for all of us, so that we can all start to feel that much more confident in our own workouts and in our own bodies. So let's dive into inflammation, and we'll start off again broadly. This is going to be a heavy science episode, but we're going to make it fun. We start comparing different things to being a big sister, being a sister with a vendetta, being a little brother, a highway. We go into it all. So we're going to keep it fun. We're going to keep it sciencey, but we're also going to start to debunk inflammation and make it a little bit less scary. So to start off, let's define inflammation. So inflammation is the process that our body goes through in order to heal a certain disease or injury or fight off a certain invader. It activates the immune system to send various signaling molecules to a region in order to promote that healing response. So inflammation is a step in the healing process, no matter if it's healing from an injury, healing from a disease, or healing from a foreign invader. So there's 3 phases of inflammation, and they're general. We're gonna start general today and get more specific into the tissue types that inflammation can affect in the upcoming episodes. So for starters, 3 phases. We're gonna start off phase 1. It is the inflammatory response, or the acute phase. And acute just really means timing. I don't love the phrasing that they're using, so I like to call it the inflammatory response. So the body senses an injury or invader, and one of the very first steps that happen is our blood vessels around that area start to vasodilate, or they start to get bigger. Now, I like to look at our blood vessels as a highway. It is the pathway where we send certain molecules to an area in order to help with healing, in order to give nutrients. So think of those blood vessels as the highway. And if we want more molecules and immune cells into that area, we need to make that highway bigger. And so that's where vasodilation comes in. So the blood vessels around that area will start to vasodilate to get more of those nutrients and more of those immune cells into that area to start the inflammatory process. The blood vessels also increase permeability to things like proteins, cytokines, and different immune cells that will help us clear out the debris in that injured or affected area. So I think of permeability as like, okay, when there's Emergency vehicles on the highway, we all start to pull over, we all let them merge on even before us. So that's what happens when our body first senses this injury or infection or invader. The blood vessels start to vasodilate, and then they also start to increase their permeability to these helpful molecules to target the area that we want to target, clean up, and eventually heal. So the damaged tissue also releases help signals of their own. So once a tissue is damaged, it starts to send off things like histamine, prostaglandins, cytokines of their own, and we can sense this in our own body as redness, warmth, and swelling. So when we have a mosquito bite or something on our skin, it'll start to get red, swollen, maybe a little bit warm to the touch. Those are the histamines, prostaglandins, and cytokines that are coming from that damaged tissue to send out help signals to our immune system. So when our immune system senses that injury, infection, invader, starts to sense those signaling molecules from the damaged tissues, they start to send in cells of their own to help out with that inflammatory process. So the first to arrive on the scene are the neutrophils. And neutrophils, I look at them as like the very excitable little brothers who never nap and sleep like really, really hard at the end of the day. So neutrophils are the first garbage collectors. So once we sense injury, infection, and invader, the neutrophils come in and they start to clean out the debris, clean out the damage, and they go crazy. They're just cleaning and cleaning and cleaning. And as they clean, they're also shouting into our bodies like, help, help, we need backup, we need backup. There's damage here, there's an infection, there's an invader, we need your help. And so they are the first on the scene. They start the cleanup process. They're also very, very loud, and they start to perpetuate that inflammatory cycle and start to recruit other molecules of our immune system to that area. They are short acting though, so they work really, really hard. They die off really, really quick. They clean up the garbage, and they do not have much control over themselves. Like they can be left unchecked, and that inflammatory process and that inflammatory cycle can ensue. So over and over and over again. So we need other molecules like a bigger sister to come in and sort of control them, put a little bit of a barrier around them. So I like to think about these guys as the very excitable little brothers. They do good work, we love them, but they sleep really hard and they need to be kept in check. So then we go into phase 2, which is the repair and regeneration phase, or the subacute phase. And again, that's more related to the timing in which this whole process happens. But this is when the inflammatory response increases. So this is when we might also feel a little bit more pain, a little bit more soreness. The immune system starts to send even more specialized cells, and eventually this phase has to sort of come to an end in order to start the healing phase after. So right now we are still in the positive, helpful stages of inflammation. It's just when they are left unchecked that's where some of the problems arise. So this one we still need it for every single healing process that goes on in our body. We still need this stage. So this is where macrophages come in, and these are a special type of immune cell, probably one of the best types, if I had to say so myself. I consider these the older sister. They're still on top of things, but they're a little bit more cautious and calculated with how they handle things. They're definitely bossier. They keep those little brothers in check. So initially they are pro-inflammatory. So they help those neutrophils, those little brothers, out with the inflammatory process. They clean up the debris. They start to signal other molecules, other helpers to come in and help clean out the debris. They continue to send out signals to help that inflammatory process, promoting inflammation. And eventually they know when to call it off though. They know that point where, okay, we've done what we can do, we've cleaned up the damage, now we need to switch towards anti-inflammatory stages and anti-inflammatory processes. So these are sort of the control factors. Again, as an older sister is, a bossy older sister, these are the control factors that they go from an inflammatory state to an anti-inflammatory state, and they can help sort of keep that healing process in check. We also in this phase have lymphocytes that come in. Now, lymphocytes are the last of our siblings, but I look at them as the middle sister that has a vendetta against all of those that have wronged her other siblings. She definitely holds a grudge. She keeps that grudge for life. and she is going to target you specifically. She is not someone who oversees the process like macrophages. She's not someone that carries on without a thought in the world like neutrophils. She is the one that has specific targeted people or molecules, antigens, invaders that she is attacking because they have wronged her siblings in some way, and she is the protective one. So these are the lymphocytes. They're specific, super targeted, and also long-acting like the macrophages, like the older sisters. Their roles, they differ. So lymphocytes is a broad category, but their roles include specific targeted activity to help clean up debris, attack invaders. They mark foreign invaders for future destruction. They also prevent the spread of infection early on, but they are very targeted towards certain invaders and pathogens, and they really help with preventing the spread of infection. Now, both of these guys also work in that phase 3. So for phase 3, this is the remodeling, maturation, and basically the chronic phase. So this is where we start to shift from that pro-inflammatory phase to anti-inflammatory. So the macrophages, the older sisters, start to sort of shift things and stop putting out those pro-inflammatory signals. And now they start to send out more anti-inflammatory signals. The body starts to shift again towards anti-inflammation. Once the debris and the invaders are cleared, that's sort of a cue like, hey, we've done our job in this inflammation phase. Now we need to shift towards anti-inflammation. Macrophages transition back towards their repair and remodeling state, and they are the ones that actually help to cue the fibroblasts that actually help to build back up that damaged tissue and build back up all of those cells that have been affected. So this phase 3 is really when we start to shift towards that anti-inflammatory state and really stopping that inflammation process to move on towards the healing phase. But none of that happens without clearing out the debris, attacking invaders, and really just that whole inflammatory process that we just chatted about. And again, that's a broad overview. We'll dive into more specifics in future episodes because I really do think it'll be super cool to talk about how different tissue types handle inflammation. So things like muscle tissue if you have a muscle injury, things like smooth muscle tissue for gut health stuff, things like the skin for wound healing, which I think that one's one of the easiest to grasp our heads around. But I hope this episode has shown you that, again, inflammation is good for our body. It is very coordinated and patterned, and there's a reason that we have it. There's a reason that we want it. It's when it perpetuates too long, same as cortisol, that we want to sort of put a halt to it. So again, future episodes will dive into inflammation with various tissue types, and then we'll also go through ways that we can promote inflammation in the right phase of the healing cycle, and then also when we notice that inflammation maybe has gone on for a little too long, or maybe those macrophages weren't able to switch over from their anti-inflammatory or their pro-inflammatory state to their anti-inflammatory state. There's a huge amount of signaling that goes on, and if we're not picking up those signals, that's when we can have sort of this chronic inflammatory cycle within our system. Or if we're still feeding our body and giving our body certain things that might promote our body sensing things as invaders or as things that need to be destroyed, then that's when we can perpetuate this inflammatory cycle and just, it'll be hard to get out of it. And that's when the negative inflammation, all of those words that we hear on social media regarding inflammation start to come into play a little bit. So we'll dive into that in future episodes. Again, this was just a broad overview, but I hope you enjoyed it. If you found value in this episode or enjoyed it, I tried to make it so much fun with science because inflammation can be just not the most fun sciencey way to learn about it, but I hope by diving into the sisters and the little brother, the highway, it makes it that much more fun. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please like, comment, subscribe, review on whatever platform you're listening on. Stay tuned for the next few episodes where we will debunk inflammation that much more and dive more into the specifics. That way you will have a better understanding of how inflammation works within your own body. Thank you guys for listening, and I'll see you guys again on the next Wellness Fixes podcast episode.